Welcome in to Bet the Edge, the college football takeover edition. I'm Brad Thomas here with Vaughn and Eric Froton. And of course, as always, sponsored and presented by BetMGM. We're going to go over the biggest games of the week, the Big Ten games, give ladder plays, and much more. But as always, before we get into things, I have to ask takeaways from this past week. I'll start out with you, Vaughn. Anything that you kind of want to highlight or talk about?
Come on, man. You know I don't want to talk about it. I told you. You asked me on Sunday, Monday, any day next week about Ohio State, I'm probably going to be upset. And yeah, why you got to push off there at the end, man? But Oregon certainly put themselves in position now. We talked about it. Their Big Ten odds, their national championship odds. If you have any belief, go get them. So those are certainly been cut in half. But getting the Heisman race down to it. And I hope you guys are all excited about spooky season. My stepson brought this home for me. A little pumpkin carved right here, baby. So I got
That's
two
awesome.
big dogs with me, feeling like it's an underdog weekend. But how are you feeling, Eric?
Yeah, I'm excited that I got to see a pretty incredible game between Penn State and USC. Obviously, USC came out hot out of the gate, but Tyler Warren, who on this show, I was lucky enough to put out at 2.5 to 1 odds for a touchdown. And let's just say, yeah, he caught 17 passes at 180 plus yards. And he did indeed get in the end zone. So it was quite a treat to be able to watch that in person, a legitimately historic tight end performance. So major ups to Mr. Tyler Warren. And thanks for catching that touchdown.
Yeah, dude, massive game. I'll say, I'm so excited the state of college football we're in right now. There's so much more parity with NIL, the transfer portal, and then these mega conferences, right? Like you get treated to USC versus Penn State, and it's an all-time classic. And then, oh, wait, that's just the beginning. We're going to go to the nighttime game, and we're going to have Ohio State versus Oregon, which was another instant classic. And it's just going to get better and better throughout the seasons and throughout the years as we progress. But let's talk about another game that's kind of impacted by the conference realignment here. Number 5, Georgia traveling to number 1, Texas. Texas, a 5-point favorite, total set at 55.5. Night game. And fellas, I already know we are so synced up right now. We're simpatico because we are all on the similar line. But before you get into your prop, Vaughn, I just want to see what you think about the side and the total in this one.
Yeah, I mean, all the money's coming in on Texas, as we kind of assumed. I mean, they've looked like the team, a wagon all year long. Both quarterbacks, whatever quarterback they throw out there is not going to have a problem. But Quinn Ewers did knock off a little rust last week. Didn't look particularly as strong as you would have thought he would against Oklahoma's defense. So, it was a look-ahead spot, as we talked about, for Texas. You're more excited about Georgia coming up than Oklahoma right in front of you. So I didn't learn anything new about Texas, guys. And for Georgia, same situation last week. They kind of had the look-ahead where they kind of let up there at the end. So I like the over. I think there's going to be a lot of points because of the prop we're going to talk about too. But I think the over is the best bet rather than picking a side here. Now, the reason why I like this prop, which is the over 264.5 yards for Carson Beck, and I'm sure you guys will attribute the same thing. Who has Texas played at the quarterback position this year? Answer, nobody. All right, you got Colorado State, nobody out there. Davis Warren, now bench. UTSA, no more Frank Harris. UL Monroe, their quarterback's named General Booty. And then you got 2 second stringers for Mississippi State and Oklahoma. So this certainly looks like a situation where best quarterback Texas will face all year is on the Georgia sideline. They showed they can make a comeback. They can stretch the field against Alabama. And Texas defense is nothing to laugh about. I'll admit that. But I do think Georgia will have to throw the ball and try and have explosive plays against Texas to beat them because the Longhorns can't match that. So I like Carson Beck. I got him over 264.5. And I think he's going to be a ladder potential, gentlemen.
Eric, go ahead and address this game from a player prop perspective.
Yeah, well, let's look at Texas. And as Vaughn alluded to, they have not faced any particularly stiff competition, but they have faced Mississippi State, who they beat 35-13, that just hung a 30-burger on Georgia last week. So that makes me feel pretty good about Texas' ability to score. In that case, I would think that we're going to get a little bit of Carson Beck again, as Vaughn alluded to. And when it comes to the Georgia offense, when it comes to when they pass the ball, you'll notice that he's 3-3 against his number, that 264, over the course of the season. But the times we went under, Tennessee Tech, 242. Yeah, they didn't have to do anything against Tennessee Tech. We remember the script in that game at Kentucky. It was 13-12, and it was as slow as you can possibly get. But then you look at Mississippi State, you look at Alabama, and you look at Clemson. Each of those 3 games against the upper echelon opponents of Georgia's schedule, when it's time to dial it up, Carson Beck dials it up. 3 for 278 against Clemson, and that was a 34-3 game. If they got any resistance out of Clemson, it would have been more. 439 against Bama, and then last week 459 against Mississippi State. Look, they're going to be in a position to have to score points. I have no confidence in Georgia's defense, which is not the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs. This is a much stripped down version of it. They're not going to be able to stop Texas. They're going to have to throw the ball. I really like this Carson Beck over passing yardage.
I'm so excited for this game because this is, the class of the SEC here. This is the 2 big dogs, the 2 obvious favorites. I want to talk about a player prop I didn't put on my sheet. I wrote it down on this sheet, and it was I texted you guys about Mr. Trevor Etienne here. I have been monitoring his number all week. I'm going to bet his under. I'm going to take under 72.5 rushing yards because it's got to the pinnacle. It's got past that 70.5, and now it's coming down really fast. Some shops have it at 66. And a lot of that has to do with it felt like Georgia was hoping or searching for an answer at the running back position early in the season, right? They were praying that Etienne would be the guy they'd get more push, but it didn't really happen for them. They get to the Alabama game, and whether that be game script or that's just how they're going to play from now on, something's flipped. The script flipped, and they unlocked Carson Beck. He made those mistakes in the first half, but then it kind of felt like he found this like flow, right? Like he wasn't turning the ball over. He was getting the ball out quicker. I think I said this exact same sentiment last week where it was quick passes out. And now I go look at the numbers, and 23rd in the country in rush rate over expected basically means they're passing the 23rd most in the country. Another reason I like Carson Beck, I think it's easy as fans of the sport to talk trash or talk down on somebody, especially when they're a prolific name that's going to be in the draft. And that happens with Carson Beck a lot. But it's hard to ignore his just numbers. 75.6 adjusted completion percentage, 9.9 ADOT, 1,800 passing yards on the season, time to throw in the 2.4 numbers, getting the ball out while still forcing the ball down the field. He's gonna have to throw this. And I said this in my notes, run game isn't working, and Texas is very good against it. This could be a shootout with a negative game script. All of those make me like Carson Beck over 262.5. Make sure you shop that line around. I've seen it pretty much everywhere. But that's my primary bet for this game. I do believe Texas find a way to win this. They feel like the class of the SEC, but I would not at all be surprised if we see an upset in this game. So I like that we're all in agreement here. Before we move over to the next game, just quick thoughts on these 2 bets. I was looking at the win totals for Georgia. Georgia's 9.5 juice to the over at -150. Texas win total is 11. It's about even on both sides at -110. Go ahead, Vaughn. Either of these, would you take the over or under, or would you just pass on both?
I'm about to look up the rest of the schedules right now because I definitely think it's an interesting talking point, because if you feel like Georgia's going to win this game and you like the plus money, then that Georgia line is the play to go here. But I do think Texas is favored for a reason, guys. I want to take Georgia, but I feel like, I'm not reading this game right, particularly on each side. It's hard to argue for each side. So I think Texas is probably the better bet to the over. Georgia still has a neutral field game with Florida. Then they got Ole Miss on the road, Tennessee at home. That's a rough stretch here after Texas. So I'd rather take the Longhorns here. How about you, Eric?
When it comes to that, we're at the week 8, pretty much right in the middle of the season. This is literally the dead red middle right now today that we're recording in terms of the regular season. I don't want to tie up my money for another 2 months until the season wraps up to go with one of these teams to do anything, when I can use that to turn it over and create velocity in the props market. I don't want to park that cash for 2 months. So I'm going to lay off and try to, focus on the weekly stuff.
I totally feel that. I only gave out a couple win totals this season, and they were just egregious numbers. Like the North Texas win total, they're one win away from it already. And then the FAU, I thought, was about 2 wins too high, which is looking pretty good. So let's move over to the next game. Another clash in the SEC. Number 7, Alabama taking on number 8, Tennessee. Alabama's a 3-point favorite, and the total is set at 56.5. It's the third Saturday in October. I already told my wife that I cannot go to her nephew's birthday party unless we stop and get some cigars, because I plan on smoking a big fat cigar as tradition after we beat Tennessee. Yes, I do believe the Crimson Tide are going to beat Tennessee here. Defensively, Tennessee's been pretty tough, right? Gone on this long streak of just great games, not allowing points, not allowing touchdowns, making teams settle for points here. A couple of metrics that I looked at in this game, it almost got me to Tennessee, where net points per drive on defense, they're 5th in the country. I thought that was pretty outstanding. Defensively, they are 1st in the country on early down success and 3rd and 4th down success. That's insane. But there's something that's really important. And I watched the Josh Heupel press conference, and I watched the I'm forgetting the linebackers coach name, Tim. I'm not going to butcher it. Tim something. And both of them clearly devastated with starting linebacker Keenan Peely out for the season, confirmed ACL. He is the leader in tackles for this team. He's graded as the 3rd best run stopper on the team. What did Tennessee hang their hats on? Stopping the run. Alabama really hasn't had to run the ball a ton, but after Alabama's game against South Carolina, it was noted in the press conference that Alabama only handed the ball off X amount of times. And DeBoer said, those are numbers he'd like to see changed. I had to pair this knowledge with a bet. And for me, it landed me on Jam Miller over 41.5 rushing yards. He's clearly the most explosive back in this backfield. I think with Peely being out of the game, it might help. And then you have to know Alabama is going to come in this and be explosive, right? They're 4th in the country in explosive play rate. It's just something that this offense they can fire at will, as you say, but it's been a DeBoer thing. Fresno State, and then Washington, now here at Alabama. So that's my favorite bet. I also add one more wrinkle to this bet that I think is going to go unnoticed is Kendrick Law's back. You might say, Brad, why does it matter that Kendrick Law, wide receiver, is back? He's one of the best blocking wide receivers in the country. It allows you to run more of that outside zone and get to that second level where you'll have another guy blocking there. So long way to say I like Alabama to win and Jam Miller. Eric, do you have anything for this game?
Yeah, we've seen the Kalen DeBoer effect on this Alabama offense where they have gone into really nuclear mode, 63 against Western Kentucky, and they've scored 35 or more every week heading into last week against South Carolina, which is very competitive, 27-25 contest. They rank 1st in ISO PPP, 5th in explosive play rate, 10th in EPA per play. And according to S&P Plus, they have the number 1 rated offense, Alabama. Now, Tennessee, we know that their defense has really been the key to their success. They're breaking in Nico Yamaliava. This is not the offense that we had seen of 2 years ago where you had Hendon Hooker running it. So that defensive line has really held and won the day for them. They've been dragging down teams and having more low-scoring affairs as opposed to Alabama gassing it up. I like Alabama's team total over 28.5. We're seeing it fluctuate between 28.5 and 30.5 right now. I just think at 20.5, they've done it 5 out of 6 games. The only one they did 26 last week against South Carolina. I think that the explosiveness is going to be on display. You're going to see Jalen Milroe in all his glory. When it comes to big competitive games, that's when Alabama shows out. So I'm going to go over 28.5 team points.
I'm going to be on the contrary here, I guess, to both of you guys, actually. So that's probably good news for you guys. We'll see. I've been monitoring this over-under earlier in the week, and it was at 53.5, up to 56.5 now. Definitely think if we cross numbers of 57 or 58, those key numbers of 30 to 27 games, 30 to 28, that type of score, then I think I'm going to be on the under here. Now, as Brad alluded to, Tennessee is more defensive than in a year we've seen in years past. I mean, I remember being on the show with you two guys 2 years ago and taking Alabama money line in Tennessee and thinking during that game, what was I thinking? This was an easy over. I think this one looks more like an under than anything to me. And Tennessee's defense and SEC play kind of prove that. But it's fishy, man. Alabama's contests have scored 52 or more in every game. The total opened up at 53.5, Brad. Makes me definitely think they want the people to be betting the over. So I like the under. Hope Alabama scores 30, Tennessee scores 23. We get the under. Eric wins, Brad cashes. We're all happy. But I think that's probably the best bet in this game if we get a key number 57 or 58.
Yeah, the total here for me is an interesting bet, or just something to look at, because from an Alabama perspective, they aren't particularly the fast team. They're the explosive team, right? So
Yeah.
it's up to Tennessee's defense to not allow the explosive plays to happen. Then on the other side of the ball, Tennessee hasn't been able to be explosive because maybe the training wheels are on. Maybe I don't know what it is with their offense yet. It's just not the same quarterback as a Hendon Hooker, as Eric alluded to. So for me, I genuinely couldn't tell you, like I couldn't come up with a predictive score on this, because I could see a lot of outcomes. But if you get past those key numbers, get up to that 57.5, get to, God forbid, 58, like I feel like you're just obligated to kind of bet that there and hold your nose at the result and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a situation where the fourth quarter could probably slow down between these two teams. And I mean, whoever loses this game is now kind of on ice, too, for the college football playoff leg. You lose a third game, you might not make it. It would make the conversation interesting, even though we know there's probably going to be one or two teams that have 3 losses that deserve to be in there. But Alabama's certainly been shaky over the last 9 quarters of football from that fourth quarter of Georgia on, Brad. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch the game. Not as excited to bet on it, to be honest.
Well, let me say one more thing before we move into that, because I keep hearing the Alabama's been shaky narrative being passed around, right? Alabama played prevent defense in the second half against Georgia, one of the best teams in the country. I can forgive that. Were they bad against Vanderbilt? Sure. But Vanderbilt, again, just knocked off Kentucky. I bet on Vanderbilt in that game. Vanderbilt's a lot better team than people are expecting. And then Alabama was bad for 2 quarters, maybe a half a quarter in that South Carolina game, where they allowed 13 points in about 90 seconds. And that was more coaching decision than it was players on the field there. So it's really something to see. A good note from our producer that I do want to highlight. We talked about pace, explosiveness, and the total in the Tennessee game. Tennessee, 43 rush attempts against Florida to just 26 pass attempts. So we'll see if they change that up, or they can stay protective and conservative. But let's move into the next game. Another good game, a game that I kind of, I don't really love neutral site games, but I'm excited that it is at least still in Georgia. Number 11 Notre Dame against unranked, Georgia Tech. Fighting Irish are 11.5-point favorite. Total set at 49.5. This is at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And I'll kick this off. I'm a pretty hard pass on this. This was one of my articles on the NBC Sports website, where we do talk about the games in a little bit of detail. And I think I wrote it's Georgia Tech or pass for me, or you wait for Riley Leonard's rushing totals. Georgia Tech hasn't been particularly good against mobile quarterbacks. We saw what happened last week against North Carolina, and the list kind of goes on. Riley Leonard hasn't been running as much, hasn't had to. They've kind of found a little bit of a groove in the passing game. But this defense, this Brent Key's defense here for Georgia Tech, I think is a little underrated. And I say it with kind of caution, because they're not like good, right? But you think that Georgia Tech gets blown out by a ton of people. But they have some big names on there that you shouldn't take lightly, especially their run defense with the anchor Zeke Biggers in the middle of that defense, 6'6", 325 pounds. You got to be a big guy to have the last name Biggers, but it's a pass from me. Eric, do you have any love for this game?
Yeah, with Georgia Tech, very efficient offense. They only have turned the ball over twice all year, and that's what you like to see when you're betting on a team. You don't see somebody who's out there just flailing around, throwing the ball all over the place, but they're not particularly explosive. Ranked 90th in ISO PPP, 85th in yards per successful play. And they've managed to get wins over Florida State, Duke, North Carolina, and their losses, only got 2 of them. 3 points to Syracuse, very, very hotly contested game. And they lost by 12 to Louisville. And that's an interesting line, that 12, because we know, we've seen this sort of fluctuate. I saw it early in the week at 13.5, down to 11.5. At the time of recording, when we had put the sheet together, is it 12.5? So we're seeing this line continue to get tighter and tighter. I love that 12.5, or at least keeping that as high as we can if you're going to go that direction with Georgia's Tech, because Notre Dame, they just lost their top cornerback, one of the top cornerbacks in the nation, Benjamin Morrison. He's out for the season. A couple games ago, they lost Jordan Botello, their top edge rusher. And, they've been frustrated with teams with strong defenses and one-dimensional offenses, it looks like. A&M, Northern Illinois, Louisville, they all kept it within 10 or beat Notre Dame when it comes to NIU. This isn't a team that's built to really blow teams out, and with Georgia Tech being at least pretty conservative and smart in the way that they play, I'm not saying they're going to beat Notre Dame, but I do think they can stay within 12.
There's a lot of good points you made there that actually went into how I looked at this game too. So let me ask you this question. Let's backtrack a second, because you said the spread reached 13.5 at one point. Do you know what the look-ahead spread before Notre Dame smacked down Stanford was?
No, what was it?
It was 8. 8 and 8.5
Whoa!
in most places. So you're telling me that Notre Dame goes out and beats Stanford, and now we're going to raise this line up to almost 4 points over a field goal? I don't think so. I don't think that was a deserving reaction there in that game. And as you spoke on, Eric, the 2 games that they did lose this year and stay within the number, those are both road games. This is a neutral field game in their favor. That definitely works for them. And what also works in their favor is the fact that Notre Dame hasn't played on the road since September 14th. That's over a month ago. So there could be that factor as well. I really like Georgia Tech early in this game. A full game spread. Notre Dame didn't look like they were going to cover their full game spread until late in that second quarter going into halftime. And I think the situation where the first quarter for Georgia Tech is a good play, plus 3.5 is a good line. The first half, 6.5. If I can get a 7, I think we get involved with that for sure. But I think the first quarter is the best bet there. Any objections to taking Georgia Tech early rather than full game?
No, I actually don't think Georgia Tech are built to be this big comeback machine. All of the games where they've had success, they've been ahead. Even in the game where when I mean ahead, I'm not talking about Florida State taking a first drive 7-0 lead, but I mean basically at halftime. Even like the Syracuse game, I believe Syracuse was up. They're up quite a bit, 7 maybe. Yeah, 7 or something like that at halftime against Georgia Tech, and they just couldn't come back because Syracuse ended up scoring in the fourth quarter, and then Georgia Tech tried to come back, ended up losing by 3. So I like it because I think that's the pathway to cover, is just kind of stay attached, continue to run your offense. I'm really excited to see what kind of prop numbers we have in this game, because there's a couple like interesting angles that we could or should be looking at. Like we have a team here who in Notre Dame's kind of struggled to throw the ball. EPA margins like 80th in the country on the drop back, but really good at running the ball. Well, Georgia Tech, really bad defending the pass, really good at stopping the run, right? So, something's going to give. I just want to see what the numbers are going to be set at. Before we move on, just going to pose this question to you. Notre Dame has a tough, and I'm going to pose it to you first, Vaughn, then Eric, you can kind of follow up here. Notre Dame still has kind of a tough schedule, a little bit more tough than just a bunch of cakewalks. They still have to play a Navy game. They still have to play against Florida State. We know Florida State's not good, but that's always going to be tough. Against USC, and have to play Army. Both Navy and Army are undefeated and ranked right now. Is there any love for the Notre Dame price for them to make the college football playoffs? It's set at minus 150. The no is plus 115. You can kick it off first, Vaughn, and then kick it over to Eric.
I think I'd take a shot of the no. That's the plus money here. And I mean, you also forgot Eric Froton's Virginia Cavaliers, who also came through for us once this year, People's Parlay. But yeah, no, they have a tough schedule, as you mentioned. I mean, 2 ranked teams as of now. They're Navy and Army. Who would have guessed that? But, USC is going to play them tough. It's a rivalry game they always get. Georgia Tech's no slouch, as we just mentioned. And Florida State, maybe they walk over Florida State, but that's a team, too, that I feel like is going to fight for something when they let their young guys start playing more. So I'd take a shot on fading the Irish. It's plus money. Wouldn't be anything in confidence. But if you're picking between the two, I can't trust this team.
I got to think. Yeah, I'm looking at the schedule, and it's palatable. They're in pretty good shape here. The last game against USC could be very interesting for this wager's purposes, because they dump that one. Ooh, it could be tough to give them that spot with 2 at minus 150. I think I probably lean more likely that they do make it than they don't. However, I think it's probably priced pretty good.
Can we talk about the real question is who got the scheduling advantage for Notre Dame to have only 3 true road games this year? That is ridiculous. At A&M, at Purdue, snooze, and then they go to USC end of the season. It's really all home or neutral field games. That is wild.
It is absolutely wild.
It's
Undoubtedly.
it's some of that like good luck, that good fortune, because sometimes we look at Notre Dame's schedule and we're like, holy smokes, they have the gauntlet. But this is one of the softer Notre Dame schedules we've seen in quite some time.
If they don't make it, then that'll be pretty. There's nothing else you could do.
It'll be a Marcus Freeman letdown, that's for sure. Before we get into our ladders plays segment, I want to let you know that we're counting down to the tip-off of the NBA season. And for those of you drafting your fantasy team, get a jump on your competition with a free Roto World basketball draft kit. Get all the rankings, stats, and player profiles you need to dominate your league all season long. Go to NBCsports.com/hoopskit to download today. You know, everyone knows I have a kid, right? You know, and we just put Miss Juliet in her own room. Now we've been about 2 or 3 weeks. All of a sudden, she decides she can't sleep through the night. We have to wake up in the middle of the night, take turns, and go check on her. Threw off my entire schedule. Boys, I forgot to add a ladder play. So while you guys are doing yours, I'm going to find at least one so we can have a little bit of a party. But Eric, take off your first ladder plays while I search, because the bagginess under my eyes is kind of prohibiting me for having good memory and good consciousness right now.
No, that's totally understandable. I'm going to go with one ladder play here. My other ladder play is my best bet. So I will, hold the suspense for just a few more minutes, but I'm going to go with Zion Chris, quarterback, the Houston Cougars. I'm going to recommend you go over 70 rushing yards for him. That is at plus 450. And you got to remember, he had his first start of his career last week against TCU, which, mercifully, they actually won, their second win of the season there for Houston. Not something to be taken lightly. They have been pretty pathetic. Got shut out each of the previous 2 games against Iowa State and Cincinnati. Lost combined 54-0 under Donovan Smith. In comes Zion Chris, and they win 30-19 against TCU, which, obviously we appreciate. He ran 11 times for 97 yards and a touchdown in that game. This is what Zion Chris does. He's not, you're not seeing him throw a large amount of passes. He only threw 18 times last game. They're going to be mauling this team. They're going to want to march, control the clock, keep it slow. And that really plays into what his, competencies are, because he's not taking many dropbacks, not going to take many sacks. And he's out there running the ball, which he does really effectively. I think we're going to get over 70 yards for Zion Chris. You get about 5-1 odds for it. I'm going to go with it. When you have dual threat quarterbacks, they're really more of the quote unquote solo threat. If all he can do is run, let's bet him to run.
Yeah, I can get down with that. Mine's something I think we're all going to agree with, and hopefully it comes through. I'm checking the current lines, and Texas is becoming a hot bet. They're out to 5 and 5.5 at some places within the last 30 minutes we've been taping. So it looks like they are continuing to get all the steam, which is good news for Carson Beck. For 325 plus yards and 350 plus yards. I'm going ladders plus 310 and plus 520 are the odds on those 2 ladders right now. As we all spoke on, we like him over the 260 marks that he's listed at. In the last 3 games alone, he's thrown for 439, 240, and then 459. So obviously they have really unleashed the passing game, scoring 31 or more in all 3 of those games. I think a situation again, if they trail, we got a negative game script like Brad said. Carson Beck can come through with us more than one way. So I'm all over him this week, and hopefully that's good news. But Brad, did you find one, or are you just going to tell one of us to?
I found one. I kind of was going to bet his base over. I didn't get quite to the window, but there's a big difference in laying minus 115 or paying like plus 220. And it's going to be Mr. Cade Klubnik, 300 plus passing yards. It's at plus 220. You could play plus 325 if you want it, plus 425. I like Klubnik a lot in this game against Virginia, and it's not necessarily any knock on Virginia. That they're a solid middling team, right? Don't do anything exceptional, but don't do anything really horrible. But what's more a play on Clemson? Clemson 11th in the country in rush rate over expected. Throw the ball 11th most in the country. It is so much so where Clemson will be up by multiple scores late in the game, and they're still throwing the ball here. Also important to note, when Clemson's last game was like one of the games where Klubnik could have thrown for 350 yards. I think he only threw for 306. It was one of the only games so far this season where he didn't have a pass completion of over 40 yards. Had one in almost every single game. I think he even had one in the Georgia game, which really inflates your numbers. They have been actively looking for those explosive plays, and Maffa hasn't been running as much as I kind of thought to start the season. So I feel like it's a pretty good a ladder spot there for a pretty solid price.
All right.
Well,
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, Brad. You can't
wait, you saw me cash his touchdowns prop?
Come on, man. I was looking for a little live bet. So yeah, last week, and I got in on Klubnik because I knew you liked him. So yeah, if it ain't break, don't fix it, baby. Let's go.
Oh man, Big Ten games. Big Ten season has been absolutely phenomenal. Number 2, Oregon taking on Purdue. Oregon, 27.5 point favorite. Total set at 60.5. This is a Friday night game.
Yeah.
And man, is Purdue, after Purdue's performance against Illinois, do they have the potential to play upsetter in this game on a massive letdown spot potentially for Oregon? Eric, do you think there's any potential in the upset, or is it just smooth sailing for the Ducks?
I think it's going to be very difficult the way Oregon's playing. This isn't the Idaho and Boise State Oregon of the first 2 weeks. They have taken care of their lower division opponents, and they have mauled them.
Yep,
as they should. They went out and handled Michigan State pretty easily. And where now they're playing against Purdue, who up until last week had shown not even a pulse on offense, nothing. They've done nothing against any FBS team that they've played. Only win they got was against Indiana State. So the good news is there's a reason why Purdue did better, and that's because they got Hudson Card was injured. He had a concussion. He was in protocol. Redshirt freshman Ryan Brown came in, and he completely invigorated that offense against a pretty decent Illinois team. 49 points. That's more than they had scored against the FBS in their previous 4 games. Keep in mind, that's all thanks to Ryan Brown. Ran for 117 yards, completed 70% of his passes, and looked like the competent signal caller that just they hadn't had all season. When Graham Harrell got fired, offensive coordinator, clearly Hudson Card was his guy, and the new guy, they were like, all right, let's try something new, injury or not. Head coach Ryan Walters has come out and already said Ryan Brown is the starting quarterback. He's in. Don't know what's happening with Hudson Card. Like, his status is very much up in the air, but it's doubtful he's playing in this game. So with Purdue last week, 32-26 run to pass ratio. That's impressively balanced. We get that same sort of a ratio this week against Oregon, and will undoubtedly be a script where they'll be behind. There's no way Purdue's defense is stopping Oregon. I think you're looking good at that 169.5 passing yardage over. I think that starts to tick up. He threw for 290 last game against Illinois, and obviously Oregon is much better. But look, 169 is a very reasonable number for the kind of script we're going to be handed in this game.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with that. That's why I like Dylan Gabriel under 292.5 passing yards. I feel like that line's too high for him in the game script that they could have. Oregon should win this game. I don't know how comfortably they win. I do think, Brad, there is some potential for Purdue here to keep it close, at least for a quarter or two, and show respect to Oregon that, hey, we're a totally different team. They were earlier in the season. We're a totally different team than when Vaughn gave out Purdue team total over 13.5, and we scored 6, and then followed up with 49 the next game.
Oh my God.
So yeah, like Eric said, they have a different quarterback situation now. That certainly is going to help them, but I don't think Oregon has to keep their foot on the gas here for the majority of this game. If you want to involve with Oregon, I think it would have to be like a first half team total over. I think there's value on the over in general in this game because Purdue can put up points now. But I think that Oregon might take them a little lightly, Brad. So maybe Purdue looks good early and that number starts to drop and we get a better bet on Oregon live in game. But I think Dylan Gabriel under 292.5, something he's 5-2 to the under on this year. I think that's a good bet considering they're 4 touchdown favorites.
Yeah, I don't know. I just couldn't see a way in Oregon losing this game. It would need to be like just crazy variance early in the game that kind of gets Oregon out of rhythm. But I did like a player prop because there's something that we've grown to see from Mr. Dan Lanning is when he gets the conference play, doesn't matter if you are the best team or the worst team, they are going to run their ish. They run what they run regardless of the score. We saw it with Bo Nix. Bo Nix had a lot of games where, they were a quick pass team. Sometimes threw it, behind the line of scrimmage. Didn't matter if they were up big or it was a close game. That's how he kind of, I don't want to say padded his stats is not the right word, but that's how he kind of got a little bit more of those more inflated numbers. Well, what we've noticed from this team is Oregon is they are going to run the ball down your throats. Mr. Jordan James. Jordan James didn't have a game with more than 17 carries before Big Ten play. And once they got into Big Ten play, 20 carries, 24 carries, 23 carries, and that was in a close game. I'm taking his over. I believe it's the number now is close to 109.5. I got it at 106.5. It's okay. I'd play it to 110.5. I'm fine with that because he was a potential ladder play. I don't normally go to just game averages too often because I think the advanced metrics tell you a little bit better story because they actually factor in rush rate and all that and explosiveness and adjusted numbers. But this just has to be said. Purdue 130th in the country in rushing yards allowed per game, 253.8 rush yards per game. So I'm taking Mr. Jordan James to hit his number against a remarkably bad rushing defense. And I don't have any more to say about this game other than I was waiting for this line to come out and I thought it'd be set around 110 and I was going to take that number.
Yeah, I like all three of our plays, honestly. I think they're all headed in the right direction. And I'll say your play, Brad, reminds me of we're entering Chase Brown territory, which is, we're going to talk about his team next. But shout out to Chase Brown, the perfect RB3 in fantasy football this year. Great guy.
Yes. Chase Brown, there's two new Chase Browns this year, two guys who have been having real fun betting, Jordan James and DJ Giddens, guys who just love going over their number and play on good enough teams. Let's talk about the next team, another ranked battle, number 24, Michigan against number 23, Illinois. Michigan, a 3-point favorite. I'm a pass. I lean Illinois, but I just feel my confidence is so lost in either of these teams where if I place a bet, it'd feel like more of guessing. But I think Eric has a pick on this game or a lean. So Eric, go ahead and tell me what you like and tell me, kind of steer me in your direction if you can.
Yeah, well, it's tough to get too excited about the Michigan offense, of course, this year. But, they're playing Illinois, which has just a terrible offensive line, 127th in sacks per dropback. And they can't run the way that you'd expect a Bielema team to. 96 in rushing success rate and 125th with an 11% blown run block rate, which leads to, obviously, stuffs. But their passing offense has been excellent, 25th passing success rate. But defensively, let's get to that Purdue game here. They gave up 536 total yards to Purdue, and their pass D is okay. But their run D, which is what Michigan does best, as we all know, I mean, it's brutal. 126 in rushing success rate, 133rd in opportunity rate, 132nd in stuff rate. Now with Michigan, their pass offense just been as bad as anybody in the league, in anyone. 133rd in yards per dropback, 134th in explosiveness, but their run offense legit. And Khalil Mullings, yards after contact, they're ranked 27th, 3.1, 35th in EPA per rush. So they can absolutely do what they need to do on that front. And with their defense, ranked 4th in team rush D performance, 24th in pass D performance, both of them. I just think it's going to be tough for Illinois to be able to impose their will and to be able to throw on this Michigan defense with the kind of, success that they have. They haven't had a particularly impressive schedule that they've played, which really plays into this sort of a lean as well. I know it's on the road, but I'm going to go with Michigan -3 in Champaign, Illinois. I lean it. It's a lean at the -3. I just think that the respective strengths of each team give Michigan an advantage.
Yeah, and it's hard to bet on either of these teams, I think. I don't know if you guys can hear the snoring going on right next to me right now. But I'm watching two Cane Corsos, and I feel like they represent
Cane Corsos, dude.
Yeah, they're literally huge, man. 120
Yeah.
pounds is one of them, and he's 11 months. And I'm like, geez. The other one's 90 pounds. It's a 3-year-old female, but they're both sleeping next to me, and they represent this game because it's a snoozer. All right, this game is on NBC, so I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. This is gonna be a bad game, I think. And under 43.5, the over is being bet heavily here. I don't know why. Maybe because both defenses haven't looked that great lately, or Michigan just becomes Casper, the friendly ghost in the fourth quarter, and they just disappear completely. But I don't know how you could think either offense is going to give you much. Michigan switched their quarterback 3 teams now. They can almost count their quarterbacks on their whole hand. And I think it's going to be an issue where teams start to figure out how to stop Edwards and Mullings. We haven't seen them both have great games together. We've seen one of the other have a good game, the other one kind of have an average or bad game. So I don't trust Michigan. I certainly don't trust Illinois, what I've seen from them, especially last week. So I have to go under 43.5 here. But yeah, like you said, Eric, I mean, it's a tough game in general, man. Both teams, whoever loses here, probably on the outside looking in the college football playoff the rest of the season too. So another situation where the loser is on thin ice.
Yeah, not a bad look.
Margin of error is very, very small there. Let's go to the next game. Iowa at Michigan State. The Hawkeyes a 6-point favorite. Total set at 40.5. And this is the NBC game, the NBC Peacock game. It's at 7:30 at night. Oh my God, how exciting. East Lansing's going to be absolutely bumping. But I'm actually going to take the visitors, and I'm going to take Iowa team total over 23.5. Iowa's not the same team as they were last year. Last year, I believe they only went over 23.5 twice last season. So far, they've already done it 4 times. They put 40 up on Washington. They put another 31 up on Minnesota. They did 38 against Troy and 40 against Illinois State. The only 2 games they didn't score effectively or a ton were against the undefeated Iowa State Cyclones, which, Vaughn, we were on Iowa. That loss is looking way better now.
That's true.
And
That's true.
Against Ohio State, and we know what the Buckeyes can do there. There's a couple things in here that are really telling for me, and I never thought I would say this. This is a benchmark that's really exciting for this Iowa team. They are 54th in EPA margin on offense this season. Most programs, you would say that's horrible. For Iowa, that is like winning the national championship. They're going against a Michigan State team is big time in transition. And I'm going to keep harping on this point. When you are fading Michigan State, one of the reasons that you want to fade them is their ball security. They don't take care of the ball, which makes them have really bad field position. And they also can't get on the field in late downs. So that's just more advantageous for us to have more time of possession, more opportunities to feed the monster, Mr. Caleb Johnson, and to score points for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, Caleb Johnson's been the most consistent player. I mean, 100 yards plus in 5 out of 6 games this year. You know that's what they're going to do. Cade McNamara cannot really move the ball down the field for the most part. I mean, he's only cracked 100 yards 3 games this year, and one of those games had 108 yards in the previous game. So he's barely moving the ball, and that makes me it is shocking because Iowa is an over team now. We talked about they're 5-1 to the over. Michigan State's 5-1 to the under. But what's the best situation for a team to come off a 3-game losing streak and be at home, coming off a bye week? I think they'll look somewhat a little bit better offensively, at least in the second half of the season. They're going to have improvements week to week. So I think Michigan State and Iowa could go over the total. It's moved up from 38.5 up to 40.5. I think that's a pretty good number, but it's kind of a situation now where everybody likes the overs in Iowa football, Brad. So I'm kind of leaning towards Michigan State team total over, thinking that's the best bet. They get over 16 points, but yeah, I'm not confident in that game at all. I mean, it's East Lansing's a hard place to play, though. I've been there a few times. It's a great place, very hard place to play. So I'm gonna have to ride with the Spartans.
Been there as well. Used to actually, fun fact, used to work in East Lansing for NBC. Yeah, I did. So I used to actually stay on campus when I would go over. I think it's a Town Place Suites or Townwood Suites, whatever it is, right there on campus. What year was this? 4 years ago, 2020.
Okay. I didn't know if it was back in the day when Michigan State was like, my friend went there when they were immediately like Curtis Drummond defense, Tywan Jones, like all those guys, you know. So I was like,
I believe I was still there with the last coach when they had Ken Walker running the ball.
I mean, not as exciting, but good times.
Almost undefeated. Eric, any thoughts for this game?
Yeah, something you touched on, Brad, is 14 turnovers. That's 127th in the country, which is a problem, obviously, for Michigan State against this vaunted Iowa defense. And not only do they turn the ball over a lot, but they don't convert the opportunities that they get in the red zone. 128th in red zone TD rate, 131st in points per scoring opportunity. And then you go and you look at, how disciplined they are. They rank 114th in penalty yards per game that they give up. I mean, just looking at this, first year offense under Jonathan Smith, the new head coach, and they're still getting things together over there at Michigan State. And when you're trying to find your identity coming in and you're playing against Iowa's defense, that's a bad scene, because they just coming off of 2 losses. They lost to Oregon and Ohio State badly. Michigan State. Now you got to go off a bye and go to and deal with Iowa. Vastly improved on the run game, as you guys both mentioned. Caleb Johnson, 4.8 yards after contact, 21% explosive rush rate. That's just insane. So I just think it's a case where a flawed offense like Michigan State is coming in with propensity to turn the ball over, and Iowa has a chance to really feast on that. Undisciplined teams generally don't do well against Hawkeyes. I'm laying the 6.5. Give me Iowa.
Yeah, I don't hate on it. I looked at Michigan State's schedule. They have Michigan next week, Indiana, and Illinois. So you basically have 4 ranked teams in a row. 6 ranked teams you consider Oregon, Ohio State.
That
Iowa
stretch.
To be ranked.
Ooh.
Yeah, brutal stretch. Now, let me ask you this. Is it a better bet to be betting Michigan State to upset Iowa here coming out the bye week, or next week against Michigan at the Big House? Do you think there's a potential in Michigan State beating this Michigan team?
I think probably Michigan, because as we discuss, it's the rivalry factor and what have you. Obviously, you get Iowa at home here, but I just think what they do does not line up well with what Iowa wants to do, and that's kind of what it gets to. But hey, we'll see how the game goes. They're coming off bye. They're at home, so maybe it would be this spot here.
I probably think probably Michigan. That in-state rivalry is just it exists. It's real. But let's move over to another game. 2 teams that are kind of exceeding expectations this year. Nebraska at number 18, Indiana 6.5 point favorite, total set at 50.5. This is going to be the 12 o'clock kick. I just want to say this before I get into the game. I did talk about a specific team that was about 20-25 to 1 to win the Big Ten. Now if you want to buy a ticket to the dance, it's like 15 or 10 to 1. Not saying that Indiana will make it all the way to the dance floor, but they might get admission into the building. And that's all we need is just a chip in a chair and a chance for us to get some hedge possibilities. Just want to say there was some guy on the show who talked about it. His name may start with Brad, Main with Thomas. Yeah, that's me. But this game is a total pass for me from a betting perspective. I didn't find a solid angle. I thought that this could be one of those sleepy situations for Nebraska where they could go into this game and kind of get beat, just falling asleep at the wheel. They've been all right this season. Indiana's been the more impressive team, and the number is under that key number of 6.5. So I had to pass. Didn't have enough conviction either way. I do lean Indiana, but if you can see this number get steamed up to like the 7.5, I think just you have to be just take the key number of 7.5 for Nebraska.
Yeah, I would not argue with that either. This spread opened up at 4.5 at most places. So people are betting Indiana, which we know was going to happen. They're at home. They're covered 5 straight games. It's one of the hottest ATS teams in the entire country. And I mean, they're 6-0 for the first time in like 50, 60 years. So people are going to be rushing to the window on this team. Nebraska has owned them, winning 6 of the last 7, but this is not the same Hoosiers program we've seen in the past. So I do like Indiana here, but I'm going to try something else, guys, that I lost on last week or the week before with Oregon State. Both these teams are coming off buys here with Nebraska and Indiana. They both have really good coaches, in my opinion. So I expect this to be a rock fight. Both these teams want to somehow make it to the Big Ten dance. Don't think either of them do, to be honest. But one of them gets knocked out here. I think the under 50.5 is the best look. That number has been stagnant, has not moved an inch. And I think the reason why is because it's going to be a slowed down game. What say you, Eric?
Yeah, Indiana, I mean, undefeated, 41 plus points per game in each of the last 5 but they haven't played the best schedule, obviously, at UCLA, Maryland, at Northwestern with their best wins. All their games have been 99% plus win expectancies, of course, and they're covering 12 points per game cover average. I mean, that's just insane. And 5-1 to the over. It's hard to find any weaknesses here with Indiana. So you'd lean, I have a lean for the Hoosiers, but at the same time, Nebraska, to be fair to them, Dylan Raiola has completely changed that offense. They were horrible last year, beat Colorado 28-10, rebounded from a tough 34-24 loss to Illinois to beat Purdue and Rutgers. That was a nice Rutgers win, 14-7. So they've shown that they will, they can grind out those games and win them. So I'm staying away from this one. I'm happy to watch on the couch.
I did see from our good friends at BetMGM, there's some money finally coming in on Curtis Rourke to win the Heisman.
Oh yeah, he's getting some Heisman talk.
Yeah, I don't think he has a chance, but just like me, there's people crazy enough to bet on this team. So
that's right. From Ohio University. Gosh, what a story.
One of the best transfer acquisitions, probably not named Dylan Gabriel this season. Before we get into the People's Parlay, I want to let you know that this Sunday night, it's a showdown of two teams vying for position in a crowded group of AFC contenders. Catch Aaron Rodgers and the Jets take on TJ Watt and the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Coverage starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
It is time, and I realize I'm really bad at doing drum rolls, so I'm going to save your guys' ears and just say, the People's Parlay! Yes, it is that time, and we're still up, plus 2.94 units. Eric, what's your first People's Parlay leg?
Yeah, I'm going to go with BYU at home, minus 9.5 points over Oklahoma State. This Oklahoma State team has been absolutely horrid over the past month or so. We're looking at Alan Bowman, their super senior quarterback, being replaced for this game. Looks like they're going to start Garrett Rangel, and that's always a harbinger of bad fortune when you're switching QBs like that. But there's a reason. They lost 38-14 to West Virginia last week. At Kansas State, 42-20 the week before, and they dropped a 22-19 decision to Utah, a team that was starting Isaac Wilson, which is the only reason why they didn't go and light them on fire. This has been a team that can't do pretty much anything particularly well. Nothing. They can't run the ball. Look at Ollie Gordon. He's been completely neutered. They can't stop the run. Their defense is one of the worst in the country, and at least in the Power 5. And then on the other side, BYU 6-0 against the spread, 6-0 overall at home, and with Oklahoma State allowing 384 and 300 rushing yards each of the past 2 games, I don't see anything that they're doing particularly well. Give me the upstart BYU Cougars minus 9.5 over the Oklahoma State Cowboys.
I'm going with Iowa State minus 13.5 against UCF. Unfortunately for the Knights, this might be the game that kind of where they pack it in, right? there's no shame in losing and getting blown out in Iowa this weekend because your season has not gone the way you wanted. You made a change at quarterback. You bench KJ Jefferson, bring in Ja'Carry Brown. Kind of a similar situation to what you were talking about, Eric, right? The change was against Cincinnati. Against Cincinnati, but now the next week against an even tougher foe, I don't understand how we could possibly expect UCF to score enough points against a really stout defense. This defense, 9th in the country in EPA margin. They're 6th in the country in net points per drive on defense as well. And it's not like they're playing like just totally anemic offenses, but they're making them look super anemic, right? They held West Virginia and Garrett Green to just 16 points. They shut out Houston, held the Iowa team who we've been talking about as being pretty fantastic, or at least bettable, at 19 points. Now they're playing against a UCF team who scored 21, 13, and 13 in 3 straight games. They can't get the run game going, and then they don't have an identity in the pass because Ja'Carry Brown's not a talented enough passer. This Iowa State team's impressive. 5-1 against the spread so far this season. Average margin of victory, 19.7. They're plus 6.3 against the spread margin as well. I'm going to talk about this game more later in another segment. A little teaser there. But Vaughn, finish up the People's Parlay with your favorite leg.
I'm going to go back-to-back with someone who cashed for us last week on your end, Brad. I'm going with Missouri money line versus Auburn. I do like the Tigers in the spot because it's a home game. Seems like a must-win for a team going on the road 3 of their next 4 contacts, especially against Alabama. Auburn's a team that lost the last 3, and they're coming off a bye, so they may look a little better here, but those turnovers have still been a problem for the Auburn Tigers. So I'm going to go with the Missouri Tigers money line here in our parlay, and that is plus 433 odds. $10 pays 53.35. So do like it. Let's get our money back, after the last 2 weeks, gentlemen.
Yes, I'm excited for that one. Let's get into our favorite bets of the week and any additional bets we have. I was going to put this as a best bet, but you can't best bet a future because I want to keep track and I want to keep my record going. But this is my favorite bet of the week. BYU to go undefeated at 11-1. BYU right now, I just want to talk about the remaining schedule. BYU has this game where they're big favorite against Oklahoma State. They play against UCF where they'll be a big favorite. Play against Utah where they might be a 1.5 point favorite. Play against Kansas favorite. Our Arizona State, we don't know about the quarterback situation. Probably a favorite in that game. And then a big favorite against Houston. Sure, a lot has to go right for any team to go undefeated, but this is a team led by Jake Retzlaff that is getting better. One thing I want to say about this team that I thought was pretty impressive is they're not crazy explosive, but they make the most out of field position and scoring off of positive field position. So defensively, when they get stops and they put you in bad situations, they score in those situations, basically maximizing their potential. That's good recipe because normally when good teams aren't very explosive, it's coming at some point or things are going to go right because they're doing the little things correctly. And that's scoring, getting stops on 3rd and 4th downs, and then limiting the big plays on the other side. So for me, I really like this. I already made a decision for anybody who does tail this bet. If it gets to the Arizona State game, that's probably my biggest worry on the schedule. That in Utah, but Utah's too early to even worry about a possible hedge. If it gets to the Arizona State game, I will hedge a little bit because their last game, they're ending a home game with Houston. So that is my additional bet. Go ahead and rattle some off, Eric.
Garrett Green, over 0.5 interceptions. Frankly, this should probably be over 1.5 interceptions because 3 of the last 4 games, he has thrown 2 interceptions in 3 of the last 4 games. Against Pitt, against Kansas, and against Iowa State. 2 interceptions each. The only one he didn't, obviously Oklahoma State, because they're completely inept. We're getting that at minus 111. It's basically almost even odds. You never see that for the interception lines anymore. They're starting to get smart and listing them at, minus 150, minus 190, all the way up to that. Getting a minus 111 over at Caesars at this is insane, and you should take it. I'm going to go with another one there, too, for you. Well, not interceptions, but Noah Fafita, Arizona. You've seen his 37.5 pass attempts out there. He's gone at least 42 pass attempts in 3 of the last 4 games. The only one he didn't have to do anything. Against Colorado, you think he's not going to be throwing the ball against Colorado coming up? That is built for a 40 pass attempt game for both Fafita and for Shador. I think that's an easy call. Go and take that. And then lastly, Rocco Beck for Iowa State. Man, I don't understand what's going on, why the books haven't caught up to the fact that Rocco Beck and Iowa State won. They're the 9th rated team in the country for a reason. It's because they're humming right now. And their rushing attack has been, it's a 3-headed monster there. We don't know what we're getting out of those running backs. He's gone for 265 against West Virginia, 277 against Baylor, and 272 against Iowa. He went for 153 against Houston because Houston, it plays at the slowest pace you can in the Power 4. It was a 20-0 game where Donovan Smith did nothing. They didn't have to sweat at all. Where you're dealing with now, and you have UCF, as Brad sort of mentioned, good run D, pathetic pass defense. You're going to put Rocco Beck at 232.5. He's going over it.
I love the Rocco Beck angle. It kind of ties in. I'm making Iowa State an official bet at 13.5, not just a people's parlay. To carry on, Rocco Beck, 11 passing plays of 50 or more yards. That's completions. I also like against this Iowa State team, +9 on the turnover margin, which is number 1 in the Big 12 and number 4 in the country. Let's get over to our best bets or favorite bets of the week. I'll be short and brief on mine. I'm going back to the well that cashes as a 27-point favorite, and that's Missouri. Not a good team here in Auburn. A lot of finger pointing, saying that Freeze doesn't have the players to run what he wants to run. They're not good. They're just not good. I want to say that this might be a tricky line at the 4 and 4.5, but I actually liked what I saw out of Missouri against UMass. And you might say it's just UMass, but let's be for real. Missouri hadn't looked like that against any of their lesser skilled foes. That was when they finally put it together. Luther Burden looked phenomenal in that game as well.
I'm going to roll with Carson Beck over 264.5 passing yards. We talked about a roll on him at a different number. It's a trifecta, collab spot, smackdown, whatever Eric wants to call it. I like Carson Beck to go over his total. I think that Texas hasn't played a true QB1 yet.
Well, if we're going to go with smackdown, then I have to do a Rock impression. We're going to lay the smackdown on your candy asses. So there we go. Hinckley Rapati, running back, BYU. And I alluded to him in my latter segment, which I'm going to certainly recommend, but he's listed at 38.5 rushing yards. He opened at 33.5 where I got him. Has only gone up a little bit, and that is a major buying opportunity because they're playing against the aforementioned Oklahoma State Cowboys, who, as we discussed, are absolutely pathetic when it comes to stopping the run. 127th yards per rush allowed, 128th in yards per successful rush, 115th in yards before contact. It's just everything you want to see. It's a total bleeding red ink all over the page. Anything having to do with the Oklahoma State defense. And then when you're dealing with BYU, both Rapati and LJ Martin both came back last game after being off for 2 games. So we have pretty much a clear understanding of what we're dealing with because they played Arizona. Rapati outsnapped him 32-26. Martin got 11 carries to Rapati's 9, but they were both pretty much an even split. No other halfback even got a snap in the game. It is a straight half and half. And with Rapati, he went for 65 yards on those 9 carries. And that was against Arizona. Not a great run D, but against Oklahoma State, it's one of the worst in the Power 4. They're going to just maul them on the ground. They're going to absolutely get the steamroller out and just road grade them. For perspective, Oklahoma State, the last 3 games, gave up 274 to Utah, gave up 300, and then the last game against West Virginia, 384.
Jeez.
I mean, just you can't make it. It's as bad as you can possibly get. I see BYU, who's savvy, as we talked about it, 6-0 against the spread, 6-0 overall. They're gonna know what to do here. Hinckley Rapati, easy call on the 38.5 over rushing yards. 70+ rushing yards is going to get you a +450. Let's roll.
I want to change my best bet. I want Eric's play.
Eric, you laid it down for us. Hey, guys, this was fun as always. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those of you watching us on our NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to subscribe and rate us. Also, a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. For Eric Froton and Vaughn Delzell, I'm Brad Thomas. Best of luck this week.